3 days after I wrote a check for $92,000 to cover every last detail of my daughter's wedding at the Pinnacle Grand Hotel in Uptown Charlotte, the head of security called me at 7:15 on a Tuesday morning. I was at my kitchen table in the same clothes I'd slept in, drinking my second cup of black coffee and trying not to think about that number. $92,000. 31 years of building an HVAC and plumbing supply business out of a rented warehouse on Statesville Avenue, and I'd written it without blinking, because that's what fathers do. At least, that's what I believed at the time. His name was Daryl. I'd spoken to him twice during the reception, a solid, quiet man who ran the hotel's security operation with the kind of calm authority you only develop after years of watching people at their worst and deciding not to be rattled by it anymore. When I saw his name on my phone screen, I assumed something minor, a forgotten item, a billing discrepancy, something I could resolve with a call and a card number. Then he said, "Mr. Nash, are you somewhere private? Are you alone?" I looked across the kitchen. My wife was at the counter, pulling a jar of honey off the shelf, her back to me, humming something low and gospel. 31 years of marriage had taught me to read that woman the way a sailor reads weather. She looked relaxed. She always looked relaxed on Tuesday mornings. "I can talk," I told him. Daryl lowered his voice anyway. "We do a routine sweep of all private suites after large events. Insurance protocol. We check for damage, missing property, anything that could come back on the hotel. Sir, we found something on the footage from your bridal lounge, from 40 minutes after your party cleared out Saturday night." He paused long enough that I heard him breathe. "I need you to come in and see this for yourself. I need you to come alone. And please, don't mention this call to your wife or your daughter until after you've seen what I'm looking at." My wife reached for the cinnamon on the second shelf. "Give me 45 minutes, I said. I told her I needed to drop by the office, a vendor sending wrong part numbers. She set a cup of coffee down in front of me, the good ceramic mug from Asheville she knew I preferred, and touched my shoulder and said, "Don't push yourself, Perry. You've been exhausted all weekend." I looked at her hand on my shoulder. Her nails were freshly done, coral pink. She'd gotten them manicured the morning of the wedding. I drove to the hotel in my truck. 30 years in the trades had taught me that a pickup truck is the most honest vehicle a man can own. Nobody asks questions about a truck. Daryl met me at the service entrance and walked me through the kitchen without speaking until we reached the security office, a small windowless room that smelled like dry erase markers and old coffee. He pulled up a rolling chair to the monitor, typed in his password, and then stepped back. "Tell me when you're ready," he said. "Play it," I said. The timestamp read 10:48 p.m. The room on the screen was the bridal lounge we'd rented. Gold wallpaper, a wet bar, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The guests had gone home. My daughter and her new husband had already left for their suite. The cleaning crew wasn't due until morning. On the screen, the door opened. My wife walked in. She was not walking the way she walked at home, that careful stride of a woman who'd been complaining about her knee since 2019. The woman on that screen walked like someone half her age. She moved like a woman who was completely certain no one was watching. She went straight to the wet bar, found the bottle of Veuve Clicquot that had been left over from the toast, and popped the cork with one practiced motion. My son-in-law came in 90 seconds later. He was still in his tuxedo, his bow tie loose, and he leaned against the doorframe and watched her pour 2 glasses with the expression of a man who had just finished a very long job and was finally getting paid. She handed him a glass. "To the old workhorse," she said. He lifted his and his very generous checkbook. They drank. I gripped the armrest so hard my elbow cracked. She settled onto the settee and crossed her legs and said, "He handed over the lake house deed Friday morning. Didn't even read the gift addendum. Just signed it and slid it across the table like it was a birthday card." She laughed. The sound of it hit me like a temperature drop. It was not any laugh I had ever heard from her in 31 years. It was flat, deliberate, the sound of someone running a calculation. My son-in-law sat across from her. "And the accounts?" "Randall has everything structured," she said. "The moment the power of attorney filing goes through, 60 days from the wedding date, the investment accounts roll into the holding LLC. Randall's been building the shell for 2 years. 14 months offshore, the last 6 months moving it through the Delaware entity. By the time Perry figures out anything's wrong, there won't be anything left to figure out." I had known Randall for 22 years. He had handled every real estate transaction I'd ever made. He sat at my Thanksgiving table. He'd been at my daughter's christening. He had called me brother. "What about Leah?" my son-in-law asked. He was looking at his glass when he said it, not at my wife. She waved her hand. "She trusts you completely. She's loyal, too loyal, just like her father. She'll follow your lead." She took another sip. "That's always been her flaw. She loves without conditions." That sentence did something to me that I don't have a clean word for. It cracked something open that is never fully closed again. "And the other matter," my son-in-law said. His voice had gone quieter. My wife set her glass on the coffee table and folded her hands in her lap. I adjusted his prescription in March. The blood pressure medication has a secondary compound now, very small doses, builds over time. His cardiologist is already noting stress indicators on the cardiac scans. It will look entirely natural. Daryl reached across and stopped the playback. He looked at me. He looked like a man who had not slept since Saturday night. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know who else to call. I couldn't just delete it." I stared at the black screen for a long moment. Then I said, "Do you have a copy on a drive?" He handed me a USB drive. I put it in my shirt pocket. It felt like it weighed 10 pounds. "How many people have seen this footage?" I asked. "Just me," he said. I locked the file the moment I realized what I was looking at. I stood up. I am 57 years old. I built everything I have with my hands and my stubbornness in 30 years of early mornings. And I have been in rooms with union bosses who wanted to shut me down and banks that wouldn't return my calls and partners who tried to cut me out. And I have never in my life wanted to put my fist through a wall the way I wanted to in that security office. I breathed through it. I put the feeling somewhere cold and deep where I keep the things I'm not ready to deal with yet. "Daryl," I said, "what you just did took a kind of integrity that most people don't have. I want you to know I won't forget it." He nodded. He looked relieved and exhausted and sad all at once. I drove home at exactly the speed limit. I used my turn signals. I needed those 22 minutes to put the hurricane into a bottle and seal it, because I was about to walk back into that house and smile at the woman who was poisoning my morning coffee. She was in the den when I got home, grading Sunday school worksheets at the desk. She glanced up. "Vorner situation resolved?" "Wrong part number," I said, all sorted. She nodded and went back to her papers. I went upstairs, closed the bathroom door, sat down on the edge of the tub and gave myself 3 minutes. I let the full weight of it land. 31 years of mornings and arguments and road trips and Sunday dinners. The life I had believed was real. 3 minutes. Then I stood up, ran cold water over my face and went to work. The next morning I drove to a cardiologist in Concord, not my regular physician, and paid cash for a comprehensive blood panel and full toxicology screening. I told the front desk I'd been feeling off and wanted a second opinion without my insurance flagging it. 3 days later, the results came back. My blood pressure medication had been contaminated with a beta blocker at double the therapeutic dose, enough to produce progressive cardiac fatigue if administered over months, enough to look, eventually, like natural heart failure. I sat in that doctor's office and felt very still, the kind of still that is not peace but something on the other side of it. From the cardiologist, I drove directly to the office of a forensic accountant named Grace Owens, recommended by a client who'd been through a complex divorce. I walked in off the street and waited 40 minutes in her lobby. When I sat across from her, I told her I needed a complete audit of every account tied to my name or my wife's name, handled without leaving any electronic trail that could be detected from our home network. She didn't ask me to explain myself. She asked what access I could provide. I gave her everything she needed and told her I needed preliminary findings within a week. Then I drove home and heated up leftovers from the weekend and watched the evening news like a man with nothing on his mind. I played the part every day. I complained about being tired. I asked my wife to repeat things I'd heard perfectly clearly. I let myself look a little slower in the mornings, a little more confused at dinner. I took the tampered medication from her hand each morning, thanked her, and the moment she left the room, I flushed it and took the correct prescription I'd gotten from Concord. I watched her watch me. She was patient. She had the patience of someone who has been waiting for something for a long time and can afford to wait a little longer. There was one evening, a Thursday about 10 days after I'd seen the footage, when I came downstairs after dark and found her on the phone in the kitchen. She didn't hear me on the stairs. I heard her say, "He seems slower this week." "Yes." A pause. "Just give it time." She laughed softly. "I know, Randall, I know." I went back upstairs. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark and gripped the bedpost until the feeling passed. Grace Owens called me on a Wednesday with her preliminary findings. 3 items. First, 11 wire transfers over 14 months from a joint investment account I rarely monitored, totaling just over $210,000, routed through a real estate LLC registered in Delaware under my name and social security number with Randall listed as registered agent. Second, the LLC had been formed 18 months prior without my knowledge or consent. Third, the named beneficiary on my $1.2 million life insurance policy had been amended 14 months ago to include the Delaware LLC as a third-party recipient alongside my wife and daughter. I called a criminal defense attorney that afternoon. I met her at her office in Dilworth, a direct, precise woman who had handled financial crime cases for 15 years, and I put everything on her conference table: the footage, the blood work, Grace's report, the insurance amendment. She looked at the documents for a long time. Then she looked at me. "If you go to law enforcement right now," she said, The first thing opposing counsel does is claim the video was digitally altered. They'll call you unstable. They'll point to the cardiac indicators in your record and argue your judgment is compromised. We need to hear all three of them together in a context they can't walk back. She paused. Do you have any access to them, a setting where you could gather them in one place without raising suspicion? I told her I had an idea about that. I called my son-in-law the next evening and told him I'd been thinking about the estate transition. I said I wanted to do something meaningful. A family dinner, a formal announcement, the kind of moment that would make Leah feel like the future was genuinely being passed to the next generation. I told him I'd invite Randall too, since he knew the documents best. I said Thanksgiving made sense. 3 weeks away, plenty of time. He said that sounded wonderful. He said Leah would be so touched. I could hear the relief in his voice, and I knew exactly what it was. In the days that followed, I moved every liquid asset I could access without triggering account alerts. $480,000 in a money market account, into a new individual account my wife had no knowledge of. I notified my life insurance carrier of the unauthorized beneficiary amendment and had it reversed. I forwarded Grace's full forensic report and the blood test results to both my attorney and the FBI Financial Crimes Unit in Charlotte. I had a long conversation with a detective from Mecklenburg County. Then I drove to the Veterans Center on Brookshire, where I'd been volunteering on Tuesday mornings since 2019, and told the director I intended to make a significant donation within the month. The Sunday before Thanksgiving, I called my daughter. I didn't tell her everything. I told her enough. I told her I had reason to believe some documents she'd signed early in the marriage hadn't been fully explained to her. I asked, very quietly, whether her husband had walked her through the actual legal implications of a power of attorney transfer before she signed. The silence on the phone went on long enough that I heard traffic in the background wherever she was. Then she said, "Dad, what is happening?" I said, "I need you to trust me for 4 more days. Don't change anything. Don't say anything to him yet. Can you do that for me?" Another long silence. "Yes," she said. Her voice was careful in the way voices get when a person is holding themselves very still. "I love you," I said. "Dad," her voice broke just slightly. "Are you safe?" "I am now," I told her. "I am now." Thanksgiving morning, my wife was up before 6 cooking. Sweet potato pie, collard greens, cornbread dressing, a 22-pound bird. The house smelled exactly the way it had every Thanksgiving for 3 decades, and standing in the kitchen doorway, I let myself feel the grief of that for a moment. The grief of the life I had thought I was living, and then I went and set the table. My son-in-law arrived at noon. He shook both my hands and told me how wonderful everything looked. Randall came 40 minutes later with a bottle of Malbec and a leather portfolio he'd brought along in case Perry wanted to walk through any of the documents. He hugged my wife at the door. She held on a half-second longer than the embrace of a friend. I watched that. I filed it. We sat down. We prayed. We passed dishes and laughed and talked about nothing. Football, the weather turning cold, a neighbor's new construction, and for 40 minutes I was the most convincing version of a man who had no idea what was coming. After the pie was served, I pushed back my chair. "Before we get settled in," I said, "I want to do the thing I promised. I want to talk about the future." I stood up. "Come sit in the living room. I have something I want everyone to see first." They followed me in. Randall settled on the love seat with his portfolio. My wife took her chair by the window. My son-in-law stood near the hallway. My daughter sat on the couch with her hands folded, her face giving nothing away. I picked up the remote. "I've been thinking about honesty," I said, "about what it means to truly know the people in your life." I looked around the room slowly. I built everything I have by trusting the people closest to me. I think it's only right that before anyone signs anything, we understand clearly what kind of people we actually are. I pressed play. The television filled with the image of the bridal lounge, gold wallpaper, a wet bar, the Charlotte skyline through the glass. The timestamp read 10:48 p.m. The door opened. My wife walked in. The audio came through the television speakers clean and full. My son-in-law had suggested the sound system upgrade himself last Christmas to the old workhorse in his very generous checkbook. My wife came out of her chair. Her face had gone a color I had never seen on it in 31 years. "Turn that off," she said. Her voice was shaking. "Perry, that has been edited. Someone has manipulated that footage. You know how they can fake." "Sit down," I said. I didn't raise my voice. There was no need to. She sat. I believe her legs gave out. The video ran to its end, every word. The Delaware LLC named clearly. Randall's name said twice in succession. The medication. It will look entirely natural. The timeline, a year, maybe 18 months. My son-in-law moved for the hallway. He found it blocked by Detective Sullivan and a uniformed officer who had been waiting in the attached garage since 11 o'clock. He stopped. He looked at me. For a moment something moved across his face that I believe was shame. Something genuine and brief. And then it was gone, replaced by the flat calculation of a man running out of exits. There were no exits. My daughter sat on the couch with tears running straight down her face, not dramatic, just steady. And she was looking at her husband the way you look at something you thought you recognized, and have suddenly realized you've never seen before. Randall didn't move. He set the leather portfolio on his lap and closed it very carefully, like a man tidying his desk at the end of a long day. He was completely calm. It was the calm of someone who had spent a career measuring odds and had finally definitively calculated wrong. I set 3 items on the coffee table: Grace Owens's forensic report, the blood panel from the Concord cardiologist, a written acknowledgement from the FBI field office confirming receipt of all submitted evidence. Every account has been frozen, I said. The wire transfers have been flagged and traced. The LLC has been dissolved by court order. The life insurance has been corrected. The bar complaint against Randall was filed Monday morning. Detective Sullivan stepped into the room from the hallway. I walked to the front door and held it open. The November air came in cold and clean and felt like something I had been waiting a long time to breathe. My wife was handcuffed in the living room of the house she had spent 31 years running. My son-in-law was escorted out past the Thanksgiving table. Randall walked to the patrol car on his own, the closed portfolio under his arm like he was heading to a client meeting. Some habits are the last thing to go. When the room was quiet, my daughter stood up from the couch. She stood there a moment. Then she crossed to me and put her arms around me and held on without saying anything. I held on too. When she finally stepped back, she looked at me and said, "Did he ever actually love me?" I looked at her, my daughter, 29 years old with everything still ahead of her. "I don't know," I told her, "because I didn't. But you deserve someone who does. Completely. No conditions, no calculation." She nodded. She wiped her face. She sat back down on the couch and I sat next to her, and we finished what was left of the sweet potato pie while the street outside filled with the ordinary sounds of a Charlotte Thursday. 3 weeks later, I drove to the Pinnacle Grand and found Daryl near the front desk and handed him an envelope. He opened it and started shaking his head immediately. I put my hand on his arm and said, "You could have deleted that file and nobody on earth would have ever known. But you called. That's worth more than the amount in there, and the amount in there is the least I could do." He looked at the envelope for a long moment. Then he put it in his jacket pocket and said, "Take care of yourself, Mr. Nash." "Working on it," I said. I wrote a check for $100,000 to the Veterans Center on Brookshire, dropped it off in person, and shook hands with the director in the parking lot in the December cold. He asked if I wanted to be recognized at the next ceremony. I told him I'd rather not. The men and women inside that building had earned the recognition. I was just settling a debt I felt I owed. The house in Charlotte sold in February. I bought a smaller place on the Outer Banks, 3 bedrooms, cedar shingles, a screened porch that faces east toward the water. My daughter drove down in March and stayed a long weekend. We fished off the pier in the mornings before the sun got too high, and ate breakfast at a diner on Highway 12, where nobody knew either of our names, and talked about everything and nothing. And she laughed at something I said, and it sounded like the realest thing I had heard in years. She is rebuilding, so am I. I am 57 years old. I spent 30 years building something real with my hands, believing that love worked the same way, built slowly, earned, made durable through time. I have since learned that trust and safety are not the same thing, and a man can have one without the other for a very long time, before the difference becomes clear. I am on the other side of that now. I sit on a porch with a cup of black coffee and watch the water change color in the morning light, and I think about what I know now that I didn't know then, and I let the wind off the Atlantic come in across the dunes and take whatever it wants to take. That, it turns out, is enough.